You were not mocked by chance. What laughed at you has now felt the ground shift beneath it, and the very silence that followed your humiliation has begun to speak another language. You have carried this with you in ordinary places, in a kitchen with a kettle still humming, in a bedroom where the light came in too early, in a car where you stared at your own hands and wondered why you had to keep walking while others stayed comfortable in their certainty. The people who laughed thought they were naming your ending, but they were only exposing how little they understood the road you were on. They saw delay and called it defeat. They saw tears and called it weakness. They saw your restraint and mistook it for emptiness. Yet your body knew what your mouth could not always explain, because your chest stayed tight at night, your shoulders stayed guarded in crowded rooms, and your spirit kept refusing the story they wrote for you. What they dismissed was not small, it was being kept. What they called late was not lost, it was under preparation. Even now, there is a quiet reversal moving under the surface, and the first sign is often that the mockery no longer lands where it used to. There was a moment when you almost agreed with them, maybe not with your words, but with the way you lowered your eyes and kept your thoughts private. You smiled when you should have spoken, you stayed still when you wanted to defend yourself, and you learned the exhausting art of surviving other people's conclusions. But there was also a deep emotion inside you, a refusal that did not need noise, a stubborn thread of life that would not let your story be reduced to what outsiders could measure in one season. You may have felt forgotten in front of a table full of confident voices, yet the one who sees in secret was not confused by that room, and the road of David was always already hidden inside the field before the throne. A whisper can be stronger than applause when it comes from the right place. The world laughed at your pace, but heaven measured your weight differently, and that difference is now starting to show in the lives of those who thought your silence meant surrender. You saw doors close with no explanation, and you had to stand in hallways of unfinished answers while other people moved as if life belonged only to the loud. Attention, you need to prepare now. I put together an exclusive resource for those who feel set apart for something greater, but live surrounded by noise, distractions, and mental overload. This is a 30-day journey that will transform your life. A guided path to armor your mind and prepare for what's coming with daily practices of focus, boundaries, and discipline. Stop negotiating with the noise. Learn to spot distractions before they control you, and strengthen your mind. Also available in an immersive audio version. Over 10 Zuru readers have already transformed their lives through the 30-day journey. Thousands of people have already started this transformation. People like you who are tired of living in the fog. Ordinary people who decided to stop accepting mental chaos. Take advantage of this limited time offer only this month. Access your link just below in the pinned comment. In those hours, the body remembers everything. The way the stomach tightens before a hard message, the way sleep breaks apart when your mind keeps replaying a conversation that never should have carried so much power, the way your hands stay busy so your heart does not have to ask the real question. Yet even there, something holy was happening, because the parts of you that wanted shortcuts were being trained to remain steady. You were learning that not every delay is denial, not every hidden season is punishment, and not every quiet road is empty. The mockers only understood visible movement, but you were being built in the hidden place where character is sealed before evidence appears. And now the strange thing is this: what looked like your pause is beginning to look like their collapse. The same ground they used to stand over you is no longer stable under them. Some of the people who laughed at you built their confidence on your discomfort, and that is why their voices sounded so sure when you were still carrying questions. They needed your uncertainty to feel tall, they needed your hesitation to feel wise, and they needed your restraint to keep the illusion that they were above you. But what is being revealed now is that pride always leans too far before it falls, and what seemed like their strength was often only borrowed noise. You are not watching random events. You are watching a moral tilt, a quiet accounting that cannot be forced and cannot be bribed. The scene may look ordinary from the outside, a phone screen left unanswered, a room suddenly colder after a certain name is mentioned, a person who used to speak loudly now choosing very careful words. Yet the deeper truth is that the same hand that protected you from becoming like them is also exposing the insecurity that lived beneath their laughter. That exposure is not cruelty, it is correction. And what comes after correction is often a dignity you can finally breathe in without apology. If you have been carrying the feeling that you had to become smaller to survive, then you already know why this reversal matters so much. Smallness was never your identity, only a season you had to pass through without losing your center. You stood in rooms where your contribution was overlooked, and still you kept doing the work that your conscience required. You answered emails that came late. You showed up to obligations that did not honor you. You kept your word when it would have been easier to disappear. And that kind of steadiness becomes a witness long before it becomes a visible reward. There is a reason the old pattern could not keep you, because it depended on you believing the worst thing spoken over you. Once that agreement breaks, the structure begins to weaken. The one who laughed thought the story was over, but the story was only moving into its true chapter. And the bridge into that chapter is built from endurance, not spectacle. What was meant to humiliate you is now being turned into evidence that you were never as alone as they assumed. You may have noticed that the atmosphere around certain people changed before their words did, as if the room itself had grown tired of carrying what they refused to admit. Their jokes began to sound thinner, their certainty began to look rehearsed, and the same tone that once intimidated you now exposes how dependent they were on your silence. This is how reversal often begins, not with fireworks, but with a subtle loss of control. You continue walking to work, you continue washing the dishes, you continue driving the same route, but your inner posture has changed, and the body knows when it is no longer living under an old verdict. Your breathing deepens, your shoulders drop a little, and your spirit stops negotiating with a sentence that was never true. The tension has not vanished, yet it no longer rules the room. What was once a wound is becoming a line of discernment, and that line separates borrowed opinion from actual truth. The fall of mockery often starts invisibly, but it is real. At first, the reversal feels almost too quiet to name, because you are used to thinking that only loud victories count. But the strongest shifts usually arrive in the places where no one is clapping, no one is apologizing, and no one is watching to see whether you finally break. You are still the same person at the table, yet the table no longer defines you. The old hierarchy that once made you feel beneath other people's reactions is losing its power because you have stopped handing it your attention. That is not denial, it is discernment. And discernment is what lets you see that the laughter aimed at you was often a mask for fear, because people laugh hardest when they sense they cannot control what God is doing. A heart that has been corrected by pain does not need to announce itself. It only needs to remain faithful while the noise around it begins to empty. What looked like your humiliation is becoming the place where your real authority starts to breathe. If any of this is landing in you, type 888 in the comments and come back to me. It is a quiet sign of overflow, a small agreement that says you recognize the turning. Your fingers writing it are not chasing attention. They are marking the moment when the old story loses its hold. Come back to me, because what happens next matters for the way you carry the rest of this road. The same pattern that once made you feel delayed is now becoming the proof that you were being preserved. You were not spared from pressure because you were weak. You were kept through pressure because your time had not come in the way others expected. There is a difference between being buried and being planted, and you are beginning to understand which one was true. The laugh that mocked you could not see the root work, the hidden strengthening. the unseen rearranging that happens when a life is being prepared for weight. Even the biblical echoes of this kind of season speak with clarity, because the stone rejected by builders becomes a cornerstone only after the room learns it misjudged the shape of grace. Your life is not an accident of timing. It's a testimony that hidden work can outlast public ridicule, and the people who depended on your diminishment are now losing the stage on which they performed their certainty. What felt like a loss was actually concealment, and concealment was mercy. You have likely seen how the body tells the truth before the mind can explain it, because there are nights when sleep leaves early and you sit with the lamp on, staring into the corner of a room as if the room could answer for all the years that passed too slowly. In those moments, the old voice returns and tries to sound reasonable, saying that you should have been further along, that you should have been louder, that you should have convinced them sooner. But that voice is not wisdom, it is residue. Wisdom is what remains when performance is no longer required, and what remains in you is a steadiness that did not come from being praised. It came from walking through fire without letting the fire define the shape of your soul. The one who mocked you assumed your restraint meant surrender, but restraint can also mean you were guarding what mattered. You were guarding your future from becoming a reaction. And now, the very people who once laughed are meeting the edge of what they cannot control. The fall of mockery is rarely neat, because pride resists the ground until the ground refuses to hold it. You can see it in a conversation that suddenly stalls, in a leader who now speaks more softly, in a person who once cut others down, but now chooses careful distance. What used to be so easy for them becomes heavy, and what once felt light to them begins to cost something. This does not mean every person who laughed is lost, because careful language matters here, and sometimes people laugh from ignorance rather than malice. Yet where there was cruelty, there is now exposure, and where there was performance, there is now fatigue. You do not need to hunt for vindication because the weight of truth carries farther than your effort ever could. Your task is to keep your posture clean, your hands open, and your heart unentangled from the old humiliation. When a life is being restored, it does not always announce itself with celebration. Sometimes it starts by removing the old noise, and that removal is already a form of mercy. If you have been tempted to revisit every old insult and replay every old scene, then this is the place where you release that habit. The mind loves to build a courtroom out of memory, but the spirit was never designed to live there. You can remember without returning, and you can learn without reliving. That is the discipline that protects your peace while the reversal unfolds. You are not required to carry the echo of every laugh just because it once hurt you. In fact, the more you keep carrying what has already been answered, the more you drain the strength you need for the new ground. So you sit at your desk, you make the next decision, you answer the next call, and you do it without reenacting the old verdict. The person who laughed expected you to become a monument to their opinion. Instead, you are becoming someone who no longer needs their permission to stand. That is how a fall begins for what was built on your diminishment. There is a moment when the air changes, and you sense that what was once over you has lost altitude. It may happen in a hallway when someone avoids your gaze, or in a message when the tone suddenly becomes careful where it used to be sharp. It may happen in silence, which is often the most honest witness of all, and because you have lived through enough seasons to recognize a shift, your spirit does not rush to celebrate too early. It watches, it listens, it waits for truth to fully surface. That waiting is not fear, it is maturity. The same maturity that kept you from collapsing under their judgment is now keeping you from becoming arrogant under your relief. You know the difference between revenge and restoration. Restoration is cleaner, quieter, and far more lasting. Now the road begins to narrow into a more intimate kind of clarity, because what happens to the mockers matters less than what happens inside you as their footing weakens. You do not need to enjoy their fall to recognize that justice has its own rhythm. You do not need to become hard to remain protected. The miracle is not only that they are losing confidence, the deeper miracle is that you are not being dragged down with them. Your face can remain calm while your spirit becomes stronger. Your hands can keep working while your heart becomes wiser. And as that happens, the old world that defined you by their laughter loses its claim on the way you read your own life. You have entered the place where discernment feels more valuable than applause. What was once a wound becomes a watchtower. What was once mockery becomes evidence that your future was always bigger than their opinion. If what I have just said is settling into you, type the words "I see it" in the comments and come back to me. Let the recognition stay where it landed. This is not about performance, but about naming what your heart has already noticed. Come back to me, because the road ahead is asking you to stay awake to your own restoration. You have not been asked to explain every chapter to people who were never reading carefully. The burden of being misunderstood is heavy only when you keep trying to translate yourself into a language that cannot receive you. But now, something has shifted, and you are no longer standing inside the same need. The room can remain noisy, the opinions can remain scattered, and your inner life can still become quieter than all of it. That quiet is not emptiness, it is order. The mockers are losing the confidence they once borrowed from your insecurity, and you are reclaiming the ground they tried to rename. There is a holiness in that kind of reclaiming, because it does not depend on spectacle. It depends on truth, settling back into its rightful place. And when truth returns, the false voice begins to sound tired. Think about the concrete things that have stayed with you through this season. The coffee cup left cooling beside a notebook. The unfriendly text that still sits unread. The long shower where you let the water fall harder than your thoughts. The grocery aisle where you suddenly remembered how small certain people made you feel. Those details are not accidental, because your life is often rearranged in ordinary places before it is ever recognized publicly. You were being taught how to carry yourself when no one was clapping, how to hold your dignity when no one defended it, how to keep moving when your name was reduced by careless mouths. That education was costly, but it was not wasted. It gave you a sturdiness that mockery cannot imitate and failure cannot erase. The old crowd thought they were setting the ceiling over your life, but ceilings are only temporary when the foundation is deeper than they understood. You are not becoming someone else. You are becoming harder to distort. What used to shake you is beginning to lose its grip, and that is why the same voices do not sound the same anymore. Not because they have become perfect, not because every problem is solved, but because your inner witness has changed. You are no longer available to the lie that says their laughter was the final interpretation. Their words were a weather system, not a verdict. Weather passes. A verdict can be overturned. And this one is being overturned in the quiet places where your spirit learned to remain honest. The more you stand in truth, the less room there is for the old humiliation to spread. It has to leave. It cannot survive long in a life that refuses to bow to it. Do not underestimate the cost of learning this kind of strength, because it often comes through nights when you had to tell yourself to breathe before you told yourself anything else. You carried the memory of their laughter like a stone in your pocket, and some days it felt easier to keep it than to admit how much it hurt. But a stone in the pocket eventually changes how you walk, and you have begun to notice the difference between carrying pain and being led by it. You are no longer letting the memory dictate the pace. That change is sacred. It means the old voice can still appear, but it no longer gets to narrate the whole room. The laugh that once felt towering now looks smaller in the light of your endurance. And endurance is often the first sign that a hidden victory has already started. You may not be able to name the exact moment the shift began. but you can feel its evidence in the way your shoulders no longer rise every time certain names are mentioned. You can feel it in the breath that comes a little easier when you walk into a place that used to make you shrink. You can feel it in the slight distance between you and the old insult, a distance that did not exist before. That is what reversal does. It creates space where pressure once lived. And when space appears, peace has room to enter. The mockers cannot understand that because they are still tied to the drama of the old story. You are not. You are listening for something better than their laughter, and that listening is already a form of freedom. If something in this message confirmed what your spirit already knew, let your like be your amen without words, not as a metric, as an agreement that what was named here was named correctly. Keep your heart open and come back to me, because agreement has a way of making room for the next clean step. There is someone in your life who needs this exact message tonight, someone quietly tired, someone secretly seeking, someone carrying a posture nobody sees, someone whose silence has become heavier than speech. Their face may already be in your mind, and the reason is simple. Recognition often moves through us before it becomes a decision. What you have received is not only for private comfort, it is also for delivery. The same way a letter reaches a door at the right hour, this word can reach a heart that has been waiting longer than it admits. You do not have to force the moment. You only have to honor the one that came to mind. When pain becomes wisdom, wisdom begins to look outward with care, and care is how truth travels without losing its gentleness. Imagine that person in a quiet room, perhaps sitting at the edge of a bed, perhaps staring at a phone they no longer trust, perhaps folding laundry with a tired face and a brave spine. Their strength may be real, but hidden strength still hurts. And hidden hurt often looks like calm to everyone who never asked deeper questions. They are the kind of person who keeps showing up while feeling unseen, who keeps answering while feeling drained, who keeps moving while carrying private disappointment. This message meets them there. It does not accuse them. It does not rush them. It tells them that the laughter they endured was not the full story, and that what seemed to embarrass them may soon be remembered differently. Share this with them, not as a recommendation, as a delivery, the same way it was delivered to you by appointment. Then come back to me, because the next step belongs to identity, not uncertainty. You have lived long enough in this season to know that being chosen rarely feels like being celebrated at first. It often feels like being refined, corrected, delayed in some places and protected in others. It often feels like learning to keep your face steady while your heart is being rearranged. That is why the real confirmation is not the applause of people who once laughed, but the quiet agreement rising inside you now. You were never meant to become a mirror of their contempt. You were meant to become a witness that contempt does not get the final word. The body remembers what the soul has survived, and the soul remembers what grace has carried. Both are telling the same truth now. You are standing in the afterglow of a reversal that began long before anyone noticed. Before this closes, type the words, "I am chosen" in the comments, not as a wish, not as a hope, as confirmation. Type it slowly and let your fingers do what your spirit is already doing. Then come back to me, because what has been spoken over you is beginning to settle into the way you walk, the way you breathe, and the way you no longer answer old voices with old fear. When you look back now, the laughter that once cut you does not look as large as it once did. It looks misplaced. It looks out of proportion with the weight of the life that carried it. You can see the scene differently now because you are no longer standing under it. You are standing beyond it. That does not erase what hurt, and it does not pretend the pain was small. It simply means the pain has lost authority over the meaning of your story. What was humiliation has become instruction. What was delay has become formation, and what was mockery has become the backdrop against which your patience was proven. You did not fail in the season that tested you. You were being shaped to outlast the people who misunderstood you. The evidence of that shaping is not always dramatic. It is in the way you choose not to answer every provocation. It is in the way you finish your tasks without needing someone else to certify your value. It is in the way you can sit in a room and know that your peace is not dependent on the room's approval. That kind of inward stability is rare, and it comes at a cost, but it also comes with a freedom that cannot be bought. You have been returning to yourself in small ways, through quiet obedience, through honest prayer, through decisions no one applauded. And each of those small returns has been a step away from the old laughter's reach. The fall of what mocked you is not only outside you, it is also inside you, because the voice that agreed with them is losing volume. You may still feel the memory at times, and you do not need to deny that. Memory is not your enemy when it no longer governs your identity. You can remember without re-entering the scene. You can honor the wound without bowing to it. That is what freedom begins to look like for you now. It has edges. It has discernment. It no longer needs to be noisy to be real. And in that quiet, you become more available to the life that was waiting for your attention all along. The mockers thought they were describing your end, but they were only witnessing the beginning of a sturdier version of you. You are being restored in the exact places where shame tried to write itself deepest. You are being steadied where comparison once made you restless. You are being taught to trust the rhythm of a story that unfolds without begging for permission. That is why this moment matters so much, because it teaches you to interpret your life from the inside out rather than from the outside in. The world that laughed cannot be the one that defines your worth. The one who carried you through that laughter is the only voice large enough to tell the truth about you, and that truth is already moving. You are remembered. You are not behind. You are not abandoned. You are being gathered back into the parts of yourself that pressure tried to scatter, and the people who mocked you are no longer the center of the frame. You are moving through a quieter kind of victory, one that does not need to shout to be real. Let that settle in your chest and in your breath. Let it touch the place where old shame used to live. Right now, you're not being erased by what happened to you. You are being clarified by it. Across the world, others are hearing the same kind of recognition at the same kind of hour, and that matters because your path is not as isolated as it once felt. There are people sitting in small rooms, people riding home in silence, people standing at sinks with water running and thoughts running faster, and they too are being met by a truth that does not shame them. You are part of something quiet and real, something that does not need to announce itself in order to hold. That is why the old laughter has less power than it used to. It cannot outrun a truth that has already entered the room. Your life is being steadied, your gaze is being lifted, and your heart is learning to remain where it was once tempted to fold. You are not finished, you are not forgotten, you are not late in the way fear said you were late. You are being returned to a dignity that was always yours, and the distance between who they mocked and who you are becoming is no longer the same distance. What once felt like a wound with no language now reads like a chapter of protection, correction, and hidden mercy. There is relief in that, because it means your suffering was never meaningless. It was not the end of your road. It was the place where your road was kept from breaking. Walk gently with what has returned to you. Keep your heart open, but keep it clean. Let the memory lose its authority without pretending it never happened. Let the present teach you how to stand. And let the quiet reversal continue its work until even your breathing knows the difference between the old verdict and the truth. Est celado. Attention, you need to prepare now. I put together an exclusive resource for those who feel set apart for something greater, but live surrounded by noise, distractions, and mental overload. This is a 30-day journey that will transform your life. a guided path to armor your mind and prepare for what's coming with daily practices of focus, boundaries, and discipline. Stop negotiating with the noise, learn to spot distractions before they control you, and strengthen your mind. Also available in an immersive audio version. Over 10 Zuru readers have already transformed their lives through the 30-day journey. Thousands of people have already started this transformation. People like you who are tired of living in the fog. Ordinary people who decided to stop accepting mental chaos. Take advantage of this limited time offer only this month. Access your link just below in the pinned comment.